Okay, as promised, we are going to learn more about prepositional phrases than just classifying them in sentences. And so a couple of things that you need to know about prepositional phrases before we get started with this portion of the exam. And so you need to know that prepositional phrases, really their sole purpose is to describe or to modify. And so a prepositional phrase can either describe a noun or a pronoun, in which case it's acting as an adjective in the sentence, or a prepositional phrase can describe or modify the verb, in which case it's acting as an adverb. So let's go ahead and look here. So the really fancy term is an adjectival prepositional phrase. Describes or modifies either a noun or a pronoun, just as adjectives do. And they're going to answer the question either what kind, which, or which one, or how many. Adverbial prepositional phrases, on the other hand, are going to describe or modify only the verb in the sentence, and they will answer the questions either how, when, or where, or prepositional phrases can also answer the question why, and that would make it an adverbial prepositional phrase. And so on this part of the test, there's going to actually be a three-step process. Step number one is you're going to identify the prepositional phrase by putting parentheses around the phrase itself, just like you do in the classification of sentences. Step number two is you are going to identify whether this particular phrase is adjectival, that is, it's describing a noun or a pronoun in the sentence, or it's adverbial, in which case it's describing the verb in the sentence. And then lastly, you are going to tell me which particular word in the sentence the prepositional phrase is modifying. And so for each prepositional phrase in a sentence, there is a maximum of 3 points to earn. 1 point for identifying the prepositional phrase with the parentheses, 1 point for telling me whether it's adjectival or adverbial, and 1 point for telling me which word it modifies in the sentence. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples, and then I'm going to let you get started on the homework. So in example number one, we have the cat in the corner is purring loudly. So recall the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify the prepositional phrase or phrases. There can be more than one in a sentence, but in this particular sentence we have one, and it's in the corner. So we've identified the prepositional phrase, and now step number two, it depends which works best for you. For some students, it works best to try to identify the type of question the prepositional phrase is answering. For other students, it works best to try to identify the word in the sentence that the question or that the phrase is describing. So we have the cat in the corner is purring loudly. The problem with trying to answer what question is that you cannot take the prepositional phrase out of context. You have to leave it in context. And so if we look at just in the corner, it appears that it's answering the question where. But really, in this particular sentence, if we leave it in context, this particular prepositional phrase is modifying the word cat. And so I'm going to go ahead and identify that cat is the word that it's modifying. And I'm going to verify that by deciding, okay, what question is in the corner answering? And in this particular sentence, in the corner is answering the question, which cat? Or which one cat, if you will. It's the cat in the corner as opposed to the cat by the fireplace. And so since it's answering the question which or which one, and it's describing a noun, cat, this particular prepositional phrase is adjectival, and we're going to identify it as such. Now on this part of the test, I will tell you it is incredibly important that you make your J's and your V's very recognizable, because if I can't tell the difference, I will count it wrong. So either make a really long tail on the J or make sure there's a really distinctive dot on the top of the J, because if it looks like a V, then I will just count it as an adverb. So in this sentence we have the cat in the corner is purring loudly. In the corner is the prepositional phrase. It's modifying the noun cat, and it's answering the question which cat. Okay, let's go on to sentence number 2. We have, the mail is on the desk under the window. So in this particular sentence, we have 2 prepositional phrases. We have on the desk, and we have under the window. So we've identified our prepositional phrases. We've already earned 2 points out of 6 on this sentence. And so the first step, we're going to start with on the desk. That's our first phrase. And we're going to say, okay, which word is this modifying, and or which question is this answering? And so on this one, I think it might be easier to answer the question where. And so it is where. So the mail is on the desk. Where is the mail? And so since it's answering the question where, that is an adverb question. And if you recall, prepositional phrases only modify the verb. And so in this case, our verb is. And hopefully that was fairly easy to identify. And so we're going to go on to the next prepositional phrase, which is under the window. Now again, don't take this out of context. We have to leave the prepositional phrase in context. And if you leave it in context, this particular prepositional phrase is modifying the word desk. And it's answering the question, which desk? Is it the desk under the window or the desk over there next to the fireplace? And since it's answering the question, which desk, it is indeed adjectival. So yes, adjective prepositional phrases don't only modify the subject, they can modify other objects of the preposition, they can modify direct objects, and perhaps in some instances they can modify an indirect object. So it's any noun or pronoun that a prepositional phrase describes makes it adjectival. And so let's go ahead and do one more. And on this particular sentence, we have, during the night, the owls in the trees hooted around the campfire. So first of all, we're going to identify our prepositional phrases, and we have during the night, and we have around the campfire. Now if you go way back to the first of the year, when we learned inverted order, and we learned that the 3 ways to have inverted order is if the very first words in the sentence are either a helping verb, because it belongs with the verb, it's helping the verb, or an adverb, or a prepositional phrase. And so I will tell you that if the very first words on this part of the sentence are a prepositional phrase, you really don't have to think, because you know automatically it's inverted order, and what makes it inverted order is that it's modifying the verb, and so our verb here is hooted. And inverted order means that the prepositional phrase is acting as an adverb because it is indeed modifying our verb. And let's test it out. What question is during the night answering? And the answer is, when did they hoot? During the night. And so that is why if a sentence begins with a prepositional phrase, it is inverted order, and we underline it twice because we know automatically it is describing the verb. So hopefully you don't even have to think when you see a prepositional phrase very first thing. You will immediately know it's inverted order. That means it must be describing the verb, and that means it must be an adverbial prepositional phrase. Okay, let's go on to the second one. We have around the campfire. So again, we can either try to answer what question around the campfire is answering, or we can decide what word is around the campfire describing. And so around the campfire in this particular sentence is also describing hooted. Yes, you can have 2 different prepositional phrases modifying the same word. And around the campfire is answering the question, where? And so where, we know, is an adverbial question. And so on this particular sentence we have 2 adverbial prepositional phrases. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. Some of you may need to review this tape a couple of times. I know that this can be confusing. My biggest words of advice are to keep the prepositional phrase in context. Perhaps try to decide which word is the prepositional phrase modifying first, and then check your answer by seeing if the question it answers verifies that indeed it is modifying the word that you decided. Anyway, practice at home, bring any questions you have to class, and I will be happy to answer them.